So great to have this premiere event happening right here, and thanks to all of you for supporting that. And Kath's just had a whirlwind official launch in the UK, which she's just returned from. So great to have you back here, hot off the press. Hosted by the fantastic Nicola Patrick today, who is a very dear friend, also a very high quality Horizons Regional Council candidate. This is not a party political. You may or may not want to pick up a little brochure that's there. Don't ask me, I don't know anything about it, but she is a writer in her own right, and actually both of these women, as well as being writers and fantastic community-minded people, both members of the Green Party. Yay! And also very happy to claim that you're both feminists, which is something that's very dear to me, so hoorah for that. We are going to run quite an interactive session today, so whilst Nicola's going to sort of guide the interview with some questions, we really welcome that if you've got questions along the way that you want to ask of Kath, please feel free just to jump on in. We really welcome having quite a dynamic session today. And this is lovely Tony, who is also here, and we can rave about you later, Tony. Tony is going to be videoing this today, so none of you will be featured visually, but if you ask questions, your voices may be captured on the video. But the camera is firmly on these two today, so you don't need to worry about appearing on YouTube or something somewhere. And we do ask that you stay around afterwards. We don't have an end time for this, so really welcome you to hang around afterwards, have a coffee, come and have a chat with Kath. There'll be an opportunity to purchase a book, and I want to say a massive thank you to you, Leslie, and Roche from Pages Book Gallery. You've been massive friends and supporters of mine, and it's great to have you participating in the Winter Wonderfest. Fantastic event with Leslie and Roche actually on Wednesday night for some mulled wine in the bookstore, and talking about some of the fantastic things that are happening at Pages. So thank you, Leslie, for being here. And I'm presuming, Leslie, you've got your magic FPOS thing with you today?
I've got the trusty Zipset.
Oh, Zipset,
Yeah.
Awesome. Cool. And just out of interest, your books are selling for?
It's $30.
$30, bargain. So, I think I've probably covered off all my housekeeping things. So, sit back, relax, prepare to be amazed, and Nicola and Kath, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, right. I was just going to sit there.
Thank you, and thank you everyone for coming along. It's fantastic to have such a great crowd of wonderful Whanganui people. I'm honoured to be sitting here with Kath, who I've known for 3.5 years now. So when I'd heard she had written this book and it was tying in with this festival, and I put the offer out just in case she wanted an excuse to come to Whanganui, and yes she did. So here she is for the official New Zealand launch. So I have read the novel, and it's fantastic. I mean, it could have been written for me, really. It covers everything that I'm passionate about. I'm like, my goodness, could the book be any more up my alley? And I wanted to start. So as Carla said, is we're going to have a question and answer, and time for questions from you guys at the end. But if we talk about something and it triggers a question you really want to ask right now, just put your hand up. Just ask it now. You don't have to hold it to the end, because sometimes that sort of changes the flow, and we'd love to have your input in the conversation as well. So I'm going to kick off with the first one, which is about the journey of creating a novel, which I know people say is like giving birth to a child, and that it's quite a massive endeavour. And not only have you written it, you've also self-published. So if you could give us a sense of what has this experience been like?
Kia ora, thanks Nicola. Kia ora koutou, it's great to be here this afternoon. Ka nau te harikoa ki hui nei tātou. Yeah, I've never been brave enough to have a baby, and full marks for everybody who has, but it's really interesting, the whole book publishing thing, because when you're doing something you love, you really want to do it, and that's really compelling. And then there's times where you want to shout at it and run away from it. So I think there's like 3 discrete stages probably for me in writing. So when I'm first writing, there's a whole process where it's actually about not having a process at all, and it's putting little snippets of ideas or half a conversation I might overhear on a bus. So, you know, beware of authors lurking on public transport. You never know what little phrases might trigger something. And so I end up with notebooks and, you know, paragraphs on Word on my PC where ideas are starting to come together. And often during that, like the voice of a character might start to kind of be like, hey, I'm over here, like tugging at your sleeve, wanting to have a bigger part. And so at that point, I'll often get a sense of what the story is going to be, and that'll kind of then guide the writing. But that first phase is very organic, it's very free. I have a little thing stuck on my notice board which says, there are endless words and I'm a Time Lord. You know, kind of that idea of just total freedom, not trying to edit or judge yourself at any time. And I think that's really, really important. And sometimes I'll write stuff that is totally crazy and will never ever see the light of day for anybody else, and in fact sometimes just get quietly destroyed, you know. But that's about that letting anything come out that you want to bring out. And then the next phase is very much about putting some structure around that and go, okay, so what is the story and how could this possibly translate into something that other people might want to read? And I think it might have been Margaret Atwood who once said that, you know, as a writer you only got to do half the job. You've got to leave space for your reader to do the other half of the job. So a lot of that next phase is judging how do you bring the two together. And then, so that creates a story that's kind of fit to read. And then, particularly with self-publishing, there's a whole piece of how do you take that story and make it into an actual article, whether it's an ebook or on Kindle or a thing that people can read. So that kind of it's physically accessible and it's, you know, hopefully not got annoying typos in it, and it reads well, and it looks good, and people want to hold it, and it functions properly on the e-reader. So there's all that kind of functional part, which becomes a collaborative process then. So there were a hefty number of midwives involved in the birthing process to, you know, help you find any loose ends that don't make sense, or to spot typos, or to challenge bits that weren't working. That, you know, I had some great people supporting that editing process. And a wonderful designer, Keely O'Shaughnessy, up in Auckland, who I commissioned to do the cover art, because it, you know, looks do count when it comes to books.
Yeah.
So a really exciting process. Quite a lot of work, but when we're working in something we care about, it becomes pleasure, doesn't it? So yeah, there was only one really, really scary, horrible weekend, I think, wasn't there? But it didn't look like it was going to happen at all.
On deadline.
Yeah.
So tell me, it feels like the books, like I know from talking to you that you've been writing for a while, but I feel like the book's been written really quickly. How has the feeling of pace happened for you? Has it been really fast, or has it been going on forever?
It's interesting. I mean, I've written, like, since I was little. I was really, really supported and encouraged at school, which was great. In fact, you know, my mum says that you were actually making up stories before I could write. Like, I just used to fill the living room with like farm animals and zoo animals and my train and like anything, and make them act out stories, until my little sister, who's 3.5 years younger than me, started crawling and just used to crawl all the way through it, apparently, and create chaos in the story. So she's so the timing, so I've always written, and about 10 years ago started writing much more seriously. I took Dame Fiona Kidman's creative writing class, and that kind of gave me a sense of how to write, and I started more seriously, and I started writing short stories, and the short stories stopped stopping at short stories, they started growing. So then I was like, okay, there's going to be a novel. So the first, like those organic jottings for what became Ruby in the Blue Sky probably started happening about 4 years ago, and I was really getting the sense that climate change is like the epic story of our time. It's the biggest one, which will actually determine how much more time we get, really. And so I had a sense that there was a story about it, but anything I was reading, and there is a sort of an emerging genre called cli-fi, or climate fiction, but other than Barbara Kingsolver's Flight Behaviour, pretty much all of it is dystopic. You know, it says we failed, and I wanted to write something which is about we might not fail, and what might it take to not fail in, you know, one fictional version. And so those ideas have started coming together, and Ruby was really emerging as a character. And I did a visit back to my family in the UK, and I've got very dear friends in Leeds. It's where Tony and I met. We were at university there together, and I worked and lived in Leeds for almost 10 years. And that clicked as the location. It felt like her city. And then I had a new business venture that I kind of meant I had to put it on hold for about a year, where I didn't really do anything. And then over the next sort of 2 years, it really came together. So then the final writing really happened over the last 18 months to 2 years, with sort of last edits kind of happening right in sort of January, really, January, February, before I sort of hit the button on this is a file to upload and off it goes into the world. So yeah, so some of it was quite recent and some of it over the last couple of years.
Wow, it's a big commitment, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, but it's you know, it's kind of like my hobby and my art and my passion, I guess. And I think it helps because there's so many things that I'm dealing with in it that take part in other parts of my life. So, you know, as fabulous Carla mentioned, you know, I'm a volunteer in the Greens alongside Nicola, so I have a volunteering part of my life and a business part of my life. But they're involved in that big epic struggle in their own ways as well. And so to some extent, this is like an escape, because all the really crazy rebellious stuff that I can't do with my Green Party volunteering, and I certainly can't do in my business, I get to do the rip shit and bust stuff in this instead. Or I don't, but you know, but the other characters do. So it becomes quite an outlet. So I think it's quite healthy. Because, you know, we're dealing with really, really big stuff that is quite frightening. You know, there's days where I wake up in the morning and I go, I don't know how we're actually going to get through this mess, if you think about all the different things that are coming together. And so to have an artistic outlet for that, I think, is really important to keep us happy and healthy for the struggle, you know.
So tell me, we should give people just a précis of what the novel's about, and in it, then I also want to move on to how much of you, Kath, is in the novel, because, you know, for me, this is a novel that when I was reading it, I was like, I didn't know Kath did that. And I was thinking, no, remember, she's the author. She's not the character. But it just felt like there was so much of you in different places. So can you please give our audience just a high level of the story? And we have agreed absolutely no plot spoilers, so we will not ruin it.
We're going to kick each other if there's any risk of spoilers if one of us starts.
We'll be very careful not to give anything away, because there's certainly a number of twists and turns. Give us a quick overview, and then we'll move into how much of you is in here.
Cool. So Ruby in the Blue Sky is a feminist climate change thriller. So yeah, there are some twists and turns in it, and it does have some dramatic events and some you know, some quite sort of big dark themes in it as well. And the novel opens with Ruby, the protagonist, and she's 27 and she's starting to hit her straps in her career as a musician. And the novel opens with her at the Grammys. The novel's set near future, so it's set 5 years from now in 2021, which gives some creative freedom to, you know, imagine some things that may or may not happen. And it opens with her at the Grammys, and in the moment where she gets a lot of attention at those awards, she sort of makes a decision which is quite impulsive, and that becomes the catalyst for the challenges that come to her during the rest of the novel from people who go, well, it's great that you think that, and we love that you think that, now what are you going to do about it? And ask her to start to put her actions where her mouth has been, and then people who don't want her using her power in that way at all. And so the novel becomes about what does she do, how much personal responsibility for creating change does she take, and what price does she pay for that.
And so, yeah, no, it's great. I'm just thinking about the book.
Practicing.
It's really good. It's really good. So, so Ruby is a character who I see a bit of you in, because she's well, she's tall with red hair.
So mine's fake though.
Yeah, but doesn't it still counts. So I'm going, she's tall with red hair. Kath's tall with red hair. But I actually also see elements of you in Ruby's mum as well. And Ruby's mum's really a grounded, environmentally focused person who is a really strong character in the book as well. But how does it work as an author when you're creating these people and probably giving some of yourself consciously, maybe some of yourself unconsciously? How do you manage that? Is it by design? Does it just happen?
Yeah, it's a mix, I think. I mean, for me, and I probably think every author is different, so I can really talk about my experience with it. So there's definitely a little bit of Magpie, where you're kind of going, I have a little shiny thing from here, a little shiny thing from here, and that aspect really works. And there's also, you know, when I'm writing and it's really flowing. There's very much a subconscious place that's kind of coming from, and I can lose an hour quite easily, not realise that time has gone, and there's a couple of thousand words on a page, which is great when that happens because it's quite productive, and sometimes it's like tearing your hair out and there's no words on the page, you know. So there's that process of putting stuff together, and yeah, absolutely in that you're drawing from things, emotional things you might have experienced, or thoughts you might have had, or things that other people might have done. And then in that editing process, there's a case of going, okay, so this character is their own standalone person, and to be credible and to be believable, they have their whole own backstory, which informs where they're going, where they've come from, and which informs their decisions about where they're going next. And they have their own traits and personality, quirks and experiences. So by that stage, it's become quite kind of distant and kind of quite remote, I guess. And they make their own, you know, they make decisions that are true to themselves, I hope, if I've done a successful job. So I think to try and answer that question, I wanted to write a book that was really the kind of book I'd want to read, actually, and really true to the stuff that I care about and that I believe in, and the things that I see around me in the world, and the amazing women that I see around me acting out lives on a big stage, like, you know, and we're seeing quite a lot of that in film and TV, where women have quite epic roles, but a lot of the time in fiction, even in thrillers, like some of the big thrillers that have come out this last 6 months, they're quite domestic stories, and that's really important. Like, we need to tell those domestic stories, whether they're about domestic violence, whatever else they're about, but we need to, I think, be having those big social, political stories with women protagonists in them as well, and so I wanted to write that. And so I guess there's a point where my personal values and passions definitely inform the book, but it's fiction, and so there are loads of things, including the sexual violence stuff, including being a rock star, including a mum being a good cook, which I'm certainly not, you know, that do resonate through. But some things you draw on. So the mum character is our generation, so her music is my music, you know. So that was lovely to write, you know, really nice to be able to honour the music that I'd been a teenager listening to in those mum's reflections. So there's those aspects of it that you are drawing on from experience. But also, you know, the internet is an incredible tool. You can become an expert on stuff enough to write about it compellingly in a relatively short period of time. So,
Well, this is what
so there's a lot of made-up stuff in it too, because it's a novel.
Please.
I think it might come in here. It's a question about, I've heard you, I've not read it, but I've heard you talk about decisions and choices and people saying, so you must and you mustn't. And I'd like to know, again, about the character, and I guess you as well, to you know, secondary perhaps, because this is your vehicle for you, but about the personal and the political. If that makes sense. If you've got more to say about that, I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, I think it's a really important question. It's almost a question that's at the sort of crux of the book, is what, you know, the things that really emotionally matter to us personally, the things that really connect with us, might motivate us to act politically, or to be expected to act politically. And there's that sort of seeking for congruence to try and make those things line up. And in that point, there becomes a whole point where how much of ourselves are we prepared to give away? I mean, you know, Nicola taking that hugely brave step of standing and running for public office because of what she believes in passionately, and wants to see happen, wants to manifest in the world, real change. But there's a huge sacrifice in terms of doing that, you know, in terms of privacy, in terms of, you know, sleep, in terms of the freedom to manoeuvre and operate. And increasingly, actually, in the world, when we've seen, you know, I mean, I went to Leeds very shortly after Jo Cox, an amazing female British politician, was shot dead in the street for the work, shot and knifed in the street for the work, for what she believed in. We're seeing news every day at the moment where Hillary Clinton is facing the most horrendous misogyny for, you know, standing for office. And it's a brave step to take. And so that divide between personal and political can be smashed apart really, really quickly at the moment. And so full honours to the people who do take it.
I have read this book, and that question is actually part of this journey, and it's really interesting because the choice made seems obvious, but it's written in quite a surprising way. So there's it's really interesting. It's really interesting, but I think that this characterisation. And we've had this conversation online already, so I know the answer to this question. What makes this a feminist thriller?
I did actually really get asked that question on the bus on the way to my parents' little village in Galloway, because I was chatting to a bloke who's a young doctor, and he, said, what was I doing and how's my trip, and I'm trying to get over that shyness and just talk about being an author, so I was practicing on him. And then he said to me, so what makes you feminist? And I was like, and I did a kind of bit of a half-assed answer, and then I did kind of write a little piece afterwards, which Nicola had read. So. And it was interesting because to me it's so obvious that it is, that I had to sort of stop and take a bit of a look back. So there's a number of things within it. One I think is the, that, what's the damn thing called, the test that on movies? That
The
Bechdel test.
Bechdel, thank you. How often do we watch something still and it fails that? Have people heard of it?
Tell them, just summarise it.
So it basically is to pass the Bechdel test, who's a female academic who first coined it, to pass the Bechdel test, a piece of work has to have at least 2 characters who are named and who speak to who are female, at least 2 female characters who are named and who speak to each other about something other than their love interest. Have that with you when you're watching stuff, and if you would be horrified how frequently things fail, or just scrape through, even really good things that just scrape through, because in that one scene, the nurse who we think's name we might have, so it's horrendous. So I guess there is a conscious decision when I'm making work that I want to celebrate the amazing women that we have in our lives and in our communities, and who are really present and who aren't just present in the stereotypical female roles. So there's quite deliberately women in there who have those kind of jobs in real life, but you don't necessarily come across them in fiction very often. So I've given them those jobs in here because I can, because I'm the author, I'm a feminist, and I can write that way. It's also, I think, feminist because it does. Sexual violence does feature in it, and it features in it as a political weapon, which it's used every day. There are women right now, right around the world, who are experiencing sexual attack because of their politics, and it's being used as an oppressive weapon right now, and I don't think we talk about that nearly enough. So I did because I can, because I'm the author. So there are infinite words, and I'm a Time Lord, so you can make those choices. And there's a big picture piece on it, which we might come back to later, which I guess, we live in a world now where the 3 biggest, most dominant, religions all come from a Judeo-Christian root, an Abrahamic root, and so all of those religions, Christianity and Judaism and Islam, which come from the same root, they all have women in a subordinate position within the way those hierarchies are structured. And whether we like it or not, our societies right now still have that implicit running through them. So it means that there are a whole bunch of ways where women are set up to be subordinate within those power structures. And the stuff that is a key part of us is diminished, not recognised, cursed, unclean, whatever it may be, as a part of that. And a lot of that is about the stuff that is our organic, physical mammal stuff. So there's a thread throughout the book which goes, there is a natural world, and as humans, and women as part of that, we are part of that natural world. And there is a worldview which says humans, and men in particular, have domination over nature. Just the quote's right at the beginning, actually, which, sort of came as part of this. So at the beginning of the book, just the little opening quotes, we have Björk, I'm a fountain of blood in the shape of a girl. And we have Genesis 1.28, God said to them, be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth and subdue it, and rule over the fish and over the birds of the sky, and over every living thing that moves on the earth. So that idea of, are we part of nature, or should we have dominion over nature, is one of the key ideas in the book. And so it sort of looks at things like climate change through that perspective, I guess. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So it is a big book. It is a big book with big ideas, but it's also a rollicking good read. Like, it's really pacey and quite hard to put down.
Good.
Yeah.
I've been getting messages going, you just kept me up till 3 a.m, so I couldn't put your book down from other people.
Yeah, no, it was really, I read it really quickly because I really was enjoying it. And so I feel like the themes are critical to the story, but the story itself is a really pacey story around, well, it's more than an adventure, it's sort of well, it is, it's a thriller. It's got a lot of that sort of edgy side to it as well. But if you think about the climate change element to it, how much of this book do you want people to understand we need now? How much do we need a Ruby and this sort of story now in real life? And how much of this is a good read?
I think both, really. I mean, like, we need thousands of rubies right now, actually yesterday, because they're running out of time. And I also don't think we can just sit around and wait for a saviour, you know. I think every action, I think, you know, every stallholder running a market stall, I think the work that Asia's bookstore are doing, I think all our local politicians, we're all pushing, and we just need to push harder and louder together more to get that change really fast at all the levels. And also we've got to stop being so bloody po-faced and serious about the whole thing, and kind of have some fun with the change that we create. So, you know, I wanted the book to be something that, you know, it's not a light-hearted read, perhaps, although I think, you know, people have told me it makes them laugh, and you know, there are places where it is, but it should be entertainment too, because, you know, we're not going to change the world by burying ourselves under the duvet and crying in doom. You know, we have to get on and have a good time while we're doing it, even though it can be really scary, even scary to do. So it's trying to get that mix, I think.
I actually did find, I really laughed in my head at some of this. It just, there is some humour in the characters and their engagements, and I also quite liked the, sorry mum, the openness about sex. Like there's quite a lot of.
I think your mum might have had some, Nicola.
She might have. She might have.
Oh, I did cringe a bit when my dad was going to read it, and he's read it twice.
Oh, really? It's definitely got some classic sort of rock star on tour sort of behaviour going on in it as well. And it was really well written, so it made me, as I was reading it, I said to Kath, because I knew we were having this conversation, I kept thinking of this conversation as I was reading it. And in it I kept thinking, I didn't know that Kath played music. I didn't know she'd been in a band. And I had to keep saying to myself, it doesn't mean everything that's described really well here doesn't mean that Kath did it.
No. Or had it done to me.
Yeah. But you must have a musical background of some sort.
Oh, well, my mum's a great singer. You know, one of my abiding childhood memories is my mum doing the washing up and singing arias from opera while she did the dishes. Wow. You know, she's like a beautiful singing voice, sang in choirs a lot. Is now learning to play the ukulele and learning Gaelic. She's part of a Gaelic singing group in Scotland. So my mum's really musical, and I played the recorder at school, did 3 piano lessons and would sooner escape and read a book. My sister's really musical, so she plays, you know, has lots of musical instruments. But I sort of, as a teenager, I kind of discovered rock music, and my dad used to audio tape the Friday rock show on the radio in the UK for me. And so listening to music and going to bands has been a really important part of my life ever since. And, you know, we still go to gigs regularly, and I've got a lot of young musicians in my life, and it's been really interesting to watch their process of self-publishing over the last few years, and to see how tremendously empowering it is for those musicians to be able to not have to have a record label, but to make their own music and put it out there and promote their own gigs. And, you know, Ruben and a bunch of other musicians in my life have been really important inspirations, and so I think they were a big draw. Combination, my own musical passion for what I like to listen to, and a lot of what I've seen from our amazing young people around us sort of fed into this, really. So, I mean, fiction is an art of the imagination, which you're weaving in little bits and snippets from everything else you experience. So it ends up not being a lot of you in it at all, because there's so much of the rest of the world to weave into it.
Oh, very good. Because I love the lyrics. Like the lyrics, I thought, wow, these are great lyrics. This should be a song.
I wrote them. I did write the lyrics, thank you.
Did very well. So tell me, now we haven't had any excerpts from the book.
Do you want me to?
Yeah, please do.
So should I do just a little bit about the opening bit, because I talked about her kind of being at the Grammys. So I'll read a little bit from that, and then I'll read 1 or 2 of the other bits, if that works. Curled here in her chair, where I've always felt safe, I'm going to write it down. I'm going to do it the old school way, with one of Mum's leaky biros. I have to do it now, before any of it starts to heal, while I can still get its shape and sharpness right. When I get to the end, when I reach today, Then I'll start the packing up. The recent stuff is just too raw, even for me, and I've made a fortune from angry confession. I'll get there, but I need to work up to it. It's one thing to express yourself in glimpses of the present, snatches of life as it happens, pasted into songs or status updates. This is different. I need to retrace my steps and try to understand. I need to start at the beginning. I think it kicked off when Stella skinned up in the loos, Grammy night, back in Feb. Weed has always made me cocky and delusional. There might have been warning signs earlier. I'd picked Scarlet Lippy and taken my knitting. Now, knitting at the Grammys does mark you as a rebel, but I was more concerned about finishing the spangly mittens for Clara, Stella's little girl, than in embellishing my image. Of course, it really began long before that night, in the garden, with Mum lifting me to see the eggs in the blackbird's nest, the start of the best science trick I will ever witness, and the beginning of my awe.
Kath, I think it was an almost intuitive choice, because this, of course, is the home of the Gonville Knitting Group, that is not only famous in Whanganui, but kind of world famous in Aotearoa. So I'm very glad that you chose the excerpt, and I see a few kind of nods and little twitches of laughter from some of the knitting ladies.
There's quite a bit of knitting in it. She does knit, actually.
It's a mix of rock and roll and knitting.
As is in real life.
Yeah.
As we have these compartmentals. And yeah, I had, I did read that the same little bit when I did the lease launcher, when I thought, right, I'm going to read today, and I reread it, and I'd seen the beautiful photograph of the knitting group in the social work that social media that Carla put out. So I said, so read that, because she's knitting. So that's really good. Do you want me to?
Yeah, I'd like,
do you want me to
another
do
couple.
Yeah, another couple? Okay. So this is later in the book, and Ruby's gone to visit her mum. We've talked about Ruby's mum a little bit, so it seems nice to read a little bit for that too. And they're in Leeds now, which is the city where they both live and where Ruby's mum raised Ruby. I chained my bike by Mum's front door, and she came to greet me. She was wearing Lippy, which she never wore at home unless we were celebrating. I could feel the excitement in her hug, the news bubbling to get out. She insisted I wait till we were at the kitchen table, a Chardonnay poured for me to match the one she was halfway through. I quit, she said. Mum doesn't surprise me often. When there's just the two of you, you learn each other's warning signs pretty well. But you love your job. Loved, she said, pouring herself more wine to ensure her conviction was well enough oiled to run smoothly in the face of my scrutiny. Something had happened while I'd been looking away, my attention caught between the group and my band. Mum has been the school gardens coordinator since I was 2, and the council created the role just one day a week. By the time I started school myself, it had grown to full time. So whenever kids visited a school for a match or a competition, and Mum had been at work, the kids returned wanting beanstalks and black Nero cabbages of their own. At the start, I would hide when she came to Chapel A Primary. I was already too tall, too pale and too ginger. I didn't need another stigma. But after a few weeks, I learned the other kids thought Mum was cool. They clustered around her to see caterpillars or the first potatoes, to learn how to mulch lettuces and string up peas. I thought they got overexcited by things I'd known forever, but I didn't hide anymore. She got up to stir the risotto while she told me, as if doing ordinary things would make the words more normal. It's been coming for a while, she said, but I've been more persistent lately. It brought things to a head in the end, she said, settling the lid on the pan and coming back to the table. In the end, I had to promise to only plant where they said, or leave. So I left. She shrugged and tipped back on her chair, emptying her glass like she was the rock star. I wasn't sure if I was proud or worried, so I poured us both more wine. She told me how, when the PE teacher saw she had planted tomato canes behind the goal net, she was sure he would have a heart attack. The risotto burned. We didn't care. We were talking power and freedom, rulers and rebellion, Aung San Suu Kyi and Naomi Klein. By the second bottle, my pride and worry had become compatible. Thank you. Do you want the last
Yes,
little bit of
yes.
drama and politics to finish it off? Okay.
Yeah.
So this is when Ruby's just sort of reflecting about where to next. For every angry believer, there were thousands of other people who had rejected the same religions, or at least followed them kindly with a pinch of salt. For every zealot, there were many, many more of us who just wanted to live and let live, but we were silent, and we'd been too silent. We'd respected different beliefs to the point where women worshipping everywhere were hidden under scarves and hats, whether they wanted to be or not. Even non-religious white girls from Bradford were being heckled off the streets if they walked around by themselves after dark. I'd always felt they were connected, our loss of awe in the planet and its replacement with big religion. Our loss of wonder at women, how we swell and birth life into the world again and again, and this faith in some chaste male god. Everywhere we relegate the awesome abundance of lust, fertility and birth to the bottom division. Sex is unclean, periods a curse, and solar mums a burden or stonable offenders, depending on where you happen to live. I've never forgotten the fuss when I was 10, anticipating my first bra, and Janet Jackson's boob popped out at the Super Bowl. I don't think it's a coincidence that the harsher the heat waves and the fiercer the flooding, and the more afraid we become, the more women are tied down. Mum's always said, when people get scared, they cling to what they know. It seems, wherever you are in the world, there is always some old guy who'll preach 50s family values or fundamentalism. The corporates and the media love it. It lets them ignore the epic failure of the gleaming money-go-round way they run the world. But it's not their world. She belongs to all of us, and she's the only one we've got.
Yeah, so I love those readings. They give you such a good taste. It's a real mix, so it's got lots of humour, real pace, and some serious content that's quite challenging. And Kath's done an amazing job of making the book feel like it was just finished yesterday. The content in it's so fresh, so relevant politically, not just the big pictures, but some details as well. It's fascinating on that front. So I'm going to wrap up with one last question, and then if anyone's got any thoughts they'd like to ask Kath directly, please go right ahead. So I want to know what's next for Ruby.
Oh.
Yes.
You mean after what happens in here?
Yes.
And after the encore at the end?
I feel like I'm possibly one of Ruby's groupies now, so...
I am writing. That's all I'm going to say. So, yeah, I don't think she quite thinks she's finished yet.
Oh, excellent. Oh, that's good news for me. Excellent. Okay, well look, would anyone else like to ask a question?
Yeah, I mean, I've had some support from a wonderful agent with some of my writing, a lady called Glenys Bean, who's been great, and she'd sort of floated it for expressions of interest to a few people, and we kind of had a bit of a lukewarm response, and so I needed to make a call as to whether I was going to commit to the patience of waiting to try and get a conventional deal, which can take years, and then once you get a deal, it's at least a year before the book hits the shelves, or whether I was going to do it myself. So I took... my darling Tony works in tourism, so I don't see a lot of him over Christmas and New Year. It's kind of peak period. So, and my business has a quiet period. So I used that time to really research how feasible self-publishing was, and kind of realised that because of my background in marketing, like I've been involved in marketing for 25 years and run a business that helps ethical businesses and organisations get their stories out there, that I actually had virtually all of the skills to do it. Like I'm good at and understand how to take a Word document and translate it into a digital file, and how to manage uploading files in different formats to different platforms, and how to navigate my way through online forms to set up currencies for sale in 6 different world zones and all of that stuff. I kind of knew I had the skills to do that, and I'm supposed to know a bit about marketing, so I ought to be able to get the story out there a little bit from a marketing point of view. The one bit that I didn't know how to do was to design a gorgeous cover, so that was the bit where I committed and invested in Keely O'Shaughnessy's great talent to create art for the book, really. And that's because whether a book's being bought in this form, or whether it's being bought for Kindle or for for Kobo download, where they might be buying it from an image that big on your phone, the cover is still really, really important. And I actually had a bookshop where we spoke on the phone. She emailed me just to check some detail about supplying it. And she'd just seen it go live on the bookseller's website, and I said, oh, what prompted you to want to order them? And she's ordered a bunch of stock. And she said, oh, well, the first thing that caught my eye was the cover, and I thought, what a great cover. And then I read, and I was like, okay, thanks, Keely, you did your job. It's working. So I think there was a whole sense that I could, and once I got over that, okay, I've got the skills, then I realised that actually it's hugely empowering to do it, because I didn't have to endure it getting categorised in a way that, I mean, I think the book trade are probably itching to put it as young adult. And I've had a little bit of feedback from a couple of people in the industry that, oh, it's probably young adult. And I kind of go, well, she's 27, she's not a teenager. Yes, it's got politics and drama and a woman who plays guitar, but, you know, I kind of grew up reading books before young adult existed as a category, so I'm not big on having it sort of categorised. It's a contemporary women's book that's a thriller, and people can put it in whatever boxes they want. So I think as a marketer, it feels quite free to put the book out there and go, well, people can put what they want around it, and to not feel so constrained by the publishing industry has to only take safe bets, because to make the numbers work, they can't afford to take a gamble. I haven't had to print 1,000 of them, you know, it's print on demand, so if you order your copy online or when Pages order their copies to get in for you to buy here, they can order small batches, they're printed as they're needed, so there's not waste, and it reduces the outlay, you know, I haven't had to get a load printed. So it was really, I think, about being able to take control of the process and to do it the way I wanted it done, to be able to make those decisions. But it would only be possible with a brilliant indie arts community here and up in the UK to get in behind it. You know, without it, it would be impossible. But that's more doable than ever, so yeah, it's good.
It's good to know.
And a patient partner, that helps.
Very good.
Jan?
Keith, this is thriller. Have you always written thrillers, and will you continue just to write thrillers, or are you going to explore other?
It's my first thriller. I've got, when I first had a short story that grew and didn't quite know when to stop, it became a kind of a half-assed novel, like it's not a novel because I didn't know what I was doing, and I've practiced the form a bit since. This is the first one where I actually really wanted to put it out there in the world. So it kind of became a thriller because the drama sort of grew around the action of the characters and the setup, and I went, oh, I seem to have written a thriller. Yeah, a little bit, sounds a bit haphazard, but part of the way through I guess I realised that. Yes, I think I probably will write more thrillers, and yes, I will write things that aren't thrillers too, and have done some. And probably that first one at least will see the light of day before too much longer, I think.
Yes.
How do you approach your plot? Do you have a preconceived idea about the sort of broad idea of where it's going to go, or do you just kind of let it evolve and then trim it back as you need to?
Yeah.
Do you think you've finished, or do you know when you've finished even?
Really good questions. So it's definitely more the second, definitely it evolves, and I think it's probably what people, you know, what you would say is kind of character driven from a plot delivery point of view, and that doesn't always necessarily go where you're expecting. So when I'm first writing it, it's very much quite like evolutionary, organic, it's feeding off what happens around it. And then there is a point where you have to, shape it back and kind of go, okay, what works, and put the structure around it to create that tension and that pace. So there's a lot of restructuring that went on at that stage, moving things forward and back so that they sit in the right way to give the reader an experience that they're going to enjoy, and to make sure they kind of come together. I knew when the end was there, and then took a breather from it, and then it does have a small afterword at the end, and then wrote that a little bit later, like almost as part of the sort of second draft process that bit came. So it does kind of evolve. I mean, some writers, like my brother-in-law, writes science fiction, and he was a very dear friend in my life, Mark, who's a good writer, and he's much more logical and methodical than me, and he writes all his plot out. He knows where the plot's going before he writes, so he knows where it's going to go, and then writes to that in his head. That's completely the opposite to the way. He's also an astrophysicist, so he's got a brain bigger than a planet, I think, which allows him to do it. But it's I have to feel my way through it, I think, and see how the way the characters want to pan out.
Awesome.
Did you have an editor?
So I had two very talented people in my life who have editing skills. They don't work as professional editors, and I didn't pay them, but they did that copy editing role in the back in the summer, and then I had 2 proofreaders who did really, really late stage proofreading as well. So it's really important to have other eyes on the job, and because I'd gone down the self-publishing route and was trying to not have to remortgage the house to do it, I was lucky enough to have people who could do a professional editing standard on it without having to employ a professional editor this time around. So yeah, it's really, really important, because you get too close to it. You can't see it, you can't tell what you've written, both that copy editing stage and the proofreading stage. It's really, really important to have external help and support. And people will ask you hard questions about, so really meant to work that way. And I'll go, this bit doesn't work. It's like, okay.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah, big time. It's really important. You're not fallible.
And just about the climate change content, you mentioned a lot of information on the internet, and whilst that's good, did you put some of your own thoughts as to why things are happening and what's happening? Or did you rely totally on perhaps concrete?
So all the science that's referenced in the book is real. So there's a reference to geoengineering, which several people have asked me, which is a potential set of responses to climate change. People have asked me about that. That is real and is proposed, and the scientist who I name check in it, is really up to that. And other stuff is based on it, like there's a reference to polar bears, and I learned more about the risks polar bears are at in zoos than I kind of probably ever thought I needed to know, and that was online research based on stuff. So I guess I've tried to give it a credible scientific background, but then what happens is the imagination. So I've pushed forward some of the things that might happen. And some of those things mix. So I was saying to Nicola earlier that it's largely set in Leeds, and during the course of the novel, Ruby refers, so it's set 2021, she refers back to a flood in Leeds that had happened a few years earlier. And sat there on Boxing Day here in New Zealand, and up on the news comes the news that Leeds has flooded. So I'd written a fictional account of that based on historical floods that had happened like in the 1930s, and had gone, okay, well, other places in the north of England had flooded, like York's flooded and Carlisle's flooded. The chances are Leeds will flood again, there's a big river and a canal, and so I'd written a fictional flood. And then on Boxing Day, Leeds flooded quite dramatically. And so I'm like, okay, so I'm either going to have to, and I was like, weeks away from publishing at this stage. So I'm going to have to either fictionalise it or make it reference the real world, because you're kind of trying to just have a bob both ways, I guess, with this kind of book. And so when I reread what I'd actually written, it was so close to the way the flood had panned out that I actually needed to tweak 2 sentences. So I moved by one street where the flood had gone to and gave it a set point in time of Boxing Day 2015, and that was kind of all I needed to change, which was a bit weird. It was a bit uncanny, but it wasn't unreasonable to think, we know what's happening with climate change. You don't need to be psychic to pick that is going to happen. And there were some things that were just a bit coincidental, like I'd reference in it Leeds had flooded, but not as badly as York and Carlisle. Well, that is how it panned out on Boxing Day, but again, that tends to be the pattern. Those 2 towns get really hammered. Leeds has got away with it more often, so the odds were that pattern was going to continue but just be extrapolated. So I've tried to take real stuff but then extrapolate it through fiction to sort of make it work as a story. There's another thing that happens quite early on where Perth's entire thirsty, dehydrated, water-deprived population gets shipped to New Zealand. So Australia's running out of water. So.
Did I see another question?
Yeah. Sometimes I read a book and sometimes the politics and the science can overtake the book. So how do you balance it so so there's still that personal story. But you're not being bogged down by the science and the politics.
Yeah, and thanks for that. I've worked really, really hard to not make it polemic. So if in doubt, I took it out. So I've taken out loads of it. It assumes quite a lot that people will, have a vague idea of what's going on, and otherwise that they'll just trust that it's fiction and they'll go with the story. And I have put non-fiction references in the back. That some of my green friends online were very, very kind. I was inundated with suggestions of some good non-fiction references to put in, so I'll put those in. I'll expand those online as time goes on as well. I'll keep it a lot there. So I love reading fiction. I care passionately about the science and politics, but I don't want to read that in my fiction. So it grates on me when I read it, and I took a lot out to just try and leave the gist, I guess, and to just sort of give illusion. And if people want to go and read and research more, did it work?
Yeah, it did. It's interesting because I'm, a very keen follower of climate change science and have a science degree background. So you would think that wouldn't bother me, but I completely get the point you're making about how it can be distracting. It's not the sort of thing. If you want to read Naomi Klein's This Changes Everything, that's when you're saying, I want to pick up a good book with lots of research and read something that's, it's actually quite a good read. It's not a hard read, but it's that sort of book. When you're picking up a novel like this, you're wanting entertainment and escapism and getting to know some characters and go and be part of a life that isn't yours. This does it really well. It's much more for me. I love that it's truly a feminist thriller, and I love that it's challenging around climate change, but it's actually a story about this sort of hardcore rebel woman called Ruby, who's a rock star and decides to use her fame to do something different, and it takes her on, an adventure is understating it, but it puts her in a place. So it's really a story about Ruby and the network of people and friends around her. So yeah, but it's interesting, your question prompted the answer that you actually dropped things out.
A lot. I took a lot out.
Wow.
Because you write it because you're exploring it and you're trying to find ways through, and then it was a deliberate decision to keep that stuff as light as I could, really. So you'll have to tell me if I succeeded.
I just feel like there's got to be, it's about a balance.
Yeah.
Because in the end, it's about her story. And
Yes.
you want to find out about her journey and what she goes through as just her story
Yeah.
amongst
Yeah.
the wider story.
Yeah. So I think a lot of that judgment as a writer is you're always trying to give enough but not too much, so that you do leave that quote I referenced earlier, where some of the work's for the reader to read into it what they want to read into it, and you don't want to be hammering them over the head with stuff, but they need to understand what's motivating the character and what's driven them to go there. So that's what I've tried to do with it, is to get that, like you said, get that balance right, and if anything, err on the light side when it comes to that, like not explaining stuff. Like if people want to know what's happening to the ice caps, there's lots of other places they can read about it. The fact it's happened, is something that I might reference in this. Does that answer it? Yeah.
I just wanted to add, I'm actually quite pleased that you have put a lighter side, because I do watch documentaries and I know what you're talking about, polar bears, etc. And it can be so deflating that you feel as, quite helpless.
Yeah.
You can actually know what needs to be done, but you're relying on politics and all the rest of it. And it's frustration itself. So I quite like the idea that you've made it lighter. So it is a entertainment novel as well. It's bringing up these things that happen.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I tried to make it something that it was entertaining in its own right as well. I'd also like, I guess it was useful for me to be able to write about some of that stuff. That there's a scene in it where Ruby's kind of trying to work out, is she going to do something or not at this particular point, and she turns the phone on and it's full of news of a catastrophic weather event that's happened, and she talks to her mum and something else has happened. She's like, oh my goodness, I can't escape from this stuff. And that's that point about when do we act or when do we not act. And so kind of fictional vehicle for that was escapism for the writer as well as for the reader, hopefully.
Kath, I just wondered, when you're not writing and running your amazing ethical business, what do you do for fun?
Tramping is one of our big things. Like, we loved, and we're really lucky living in the Waitakere Ranges, that there's great tramping just on our doorstep. And and music and movies, and being in the big outdoors is kind of my thing. And I have a fantastic business partner, and we have a great team in business, so that's quite a mature business. It's 15 years old now, so I've been getting that one a bit perfected, so I can have some time to write as well. So.
And you drink tea?
Yeah, tea and beer, actually. Those things are both real. The tea passion and the beer is about the one thing you can tell. That's half, the rest made up.
What's a good book that you've read recently that you've just loved?
Cool. Yeah, I just read Station 11, actually, which is, it won the Arthur C. Clarke Award not this year, but like the last one, like the 2015 one, and that's set near future too, actually, and it is post-apocalyptic. I actually said that. I can't usually say that word.
You did well.
Yes. But it's got really strong female characters in it, and it's just really, really well written. And it writes quite a lot about loss and regret and what we might miss, and a lot of it is, a sense of just joy and being really present in the world and really cherishing the everyday mundaneness of the things and the splendour that is around us. So it has a lot of that in it, even through that kind of dystopic lens. So yeah, I really enjoyed that. That was good.
Well, it looks like we might be coming to an actual conclusion there, but we certainly encourage you to stay and have some individual conversations with Kath. Just before we completely wrap up, and I thank you enormously. If you are interested in those kind of more meaty feminist issues, a couple of things that are happening on Tuesday which you might be interested in. The very dynamic Helen Marie O'Connell, the president of the Film Society, who ran a fantastic Women in Film Circle back in our summer festival, La Fiesta, and referring to the Bechdel test which we've talked about today, we'll be revisiting some themes around women in film, so that's in the program. That's Tuesday afternoon, and then you can come and join again on Tuesday evening at the Women's Network. We're going to be showing a documentary based on 1970s feminists. She's beautiful when she's angry, and Nicola will be leading a bit of a kind of pre-film discussion around that, and we'll be having a cup of tea and a chat afterwards, so there's some really good meaty stuff. And continuing on our visitors theme, we've got a fantastic event happening tomorrow at the same time, but at the Women's Network, with visiting lecturer and photographer Caroline Macquarie, who's coming from Wellington, and she's going to be doing a brilliant talk about her No Town exhibition, which is the idea of exploring abandoned space. So some fantastic stuff coming out in our Winter Wonderfest. But Kath, just really want to thank you so much for choosing Whanganui to come to for your New Zealand launch, and thanks for all of the wonderful things that you're posting about Whanganui while you're here, and hopefully, Tony, you'll be taking away some wonderful tourism ideas too as a result of your visit. And Nicola, mate, always fantastic to have your support and your friendship, and been a really great afternoon here. So without further ado, very warm round of applause.
I'm actually just going to jump in, Carla, because I just have to say, you are one amazing wahine. And the Whanganui Women's Network, what an asset. 30 years of amazing cultivation of community and support of women. And, there's some clear, great outcomes from it, because the community's buzzing. I've had a great morning here today, and really lovely afternoon. So, Carla, thank you so much for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I couldn't possibly have wished for a better way to kick things off here in Aotearoa, so thank you for that. Also, I want to name check Anne-Marie McDonald from the Chronicle, who's just done I was in the paper. How cool is that? You read it in the paper and came. So, our mainstream news media can get quite a beat up these days, and I just want to acknowledge that, our regional press is healthy and alive and doing great work and connecting us, which is what, what its job should be, really. Rochelle and Leslie from Pages, what an amazing bookshop. I got an email going, someone's ordered the book, and then I'm like, would you like to come and help sell it? And we just made it happen while I was in the UK by email, so you're amazing. Great, gorgeous bookshop. Gorgeous bookshop, and great celebrator. And Kelly, you're just a legend. This library that you've facilitated is great, amazing events, and privileged to meet you last night, and thank you so much for all your work you've done to champion books and champion people here and bring people and ideas together. So, you're an absolute star. Thank you. And Nicola, you're just one of the most amazing people to connect people and connect ideas, and just so generous with those ideas and how they can bring people together. And none of this would happen without you, so thank you so much.
I want to know how you spell that test. Is it Bechdel?
Bechdel.
Bechdel.
Yeah.
Thank you, and thank you for filling in my brain phase when I was like,
Yeah, you did good.
Thanks everybody, you're amazing.